golden child brother accused me of theft and got me kicked out. Now 5 years later, my parents want me to testify against him for stealing $100,000 from their business. Hey Reddit. So I, 26 million, received a letter that my estranged parents had sent to me through my aunt asking me to help them out with a lawsuit. Interestingly enough, the lawsuit is against my younger brother, and that's the reason why I got kicked out of my house and cut off by my family 5 years ago. So I'm kind of confused about what to do. Right now, my brother James, 23 months, and I have pretty much grown up constantly hating and fighting each other. The sibling rivalry was pretty bad, and I totally blame my parents for that because whenever I was younger, it became really clear to me after James was born that he was their priority now, and that made me really jealous. So while we were growing up, I would try everything in my power to get their attention. And when James was a little older as well, he started doing the same thing, and without even realizing it, we started competing with each other. And instead of discouraging that and making sure that we got along, well, our parents had encouraged the kind of behavior, and we ended up hating each other. So that was pretty sad because I really do feel like James and I could have grown up normally if our parents hadn't encouraged our sibling rivalry. And the cherry on top of that was that no matter how much I tried, it seemed like my parents were always going to prefer James over me. He was their golden son who could never do anything wrong. And it was pretty obvious to me after one point, and that made me resent him even more. So eventually the fights were not childish and petty anymore, they were really nasty. And after one such fight 5 years ago, he decided to make some false accusations of theft against me and got me kicked out of the house. I had been home back from college during the holidays. I don't even remember what we had thought about, but I remember that the next evening, he started throwing a tantrum about how his card had gone missing earlier that day and forced everyone to look all over the house for it. Obviously, we couldn't find it anywhere. And then while he was looking for it in my room, he found it in my wallet and started screaming about how I had stolen his card. I was pretty sure that he was the one who planted it in my wallet. So I started to deny his accusations. Then he said he did not trust me and pushed me out of my room and locked me out so he could go through my belongings and see if I had purchased anything new with his money. My parents did not even intervene, even though this was extremely humiliating and unnecessary, because even if I had stolen his card, like he said, I certainly wouldn't even have known how to access his funds. That was just common sense, but I don't think anybody from my family possesses that. Anyway, I thought finding his card in my wallet would be the worst of it. But then a couple of minutes later, he came out of my room with a brand new MacBook and started accusing me of buying that with his money because he had just checked his bank account and said that I had practically drained it. I don't know how much money he had to begin with, but the MacBook that he had bought, claiming that it had been me, couldn't have cost more than $1,500. And I know that for a fact, since I had been researching and planning to buy that for myself, but with my own money, of course, anyway. And he brought that out of my room and started saying that I had hidden it very carefully under my bed so that nobody would be able to find it. I started denying it, and we started fighting again. I could hardly believe that he had pulled off something like this, because by then I was totally sure that he had planted that card in the MacBook in my room at some point, and now he was going out of his way to get me into hot water with our parents while we were arguing, and I was trying to defend myself with all the right logic and stuff. Like the fact that I didn't even know how to access his money and his card being on me meant absolutely nothing. My parents did not say anything. They stayed quiet for a while. Then James started crying and accusing me of spending his hard-earned money without his consent, which was apparently breaking his heart because he had been saving up to buy a car that year. And as usual, his tears were all that was needed for my parents to immediately decide whose side they were on. As soon as he started crying, they went into parent mode and started consoling him as if some great tragedy had taken place in his life. I couldn't even believe that they were buying his act, and I even told him that he was the one who had planned all of this, so he did not deserve the sympathy. But at that point, my parents told me that they had had enough of me bullying my brother, and this was the last straw. I had no idea what they meant by that, and I was still trying to defend myself. But my parents then told me that they did not want to hear me out at all because they were sure that James would not lie about something like this, and they told me that they were really ashamed of the fact that they had raised a thief like me. And then finally, they asked me to pack my things and leave the house immediately. Even after they told me to leave, I tried to reason with them and explain to them that I hadn't done anything that I was being accused of and that James was lying to him, but they were just not interested. They had decided that I was a thief, and now they wanted me to leave the house and were also going to cut off the funds that they had been sending me so far, so I wouldn't even be able to pay for my tuition in my final year of college. I did have some money saved aside. That was barely enough to cover anything, so I put up a fight to prevent myself from getting kicked out, but I couldn't do it. Eventually, I had to leave that day, and I landed up at my aunt's house. I explained the situation to her, and she was very understanding about it. She and her husband pulled together some money, and it was enough to cover my expenses for that year. So I was immensely grateful to them. My aunt is my mom's older sister, and she doesn't have any kids of her own, so I guess that's why she was ready to help her out. But I did not take that for granted, even though she never asked for it. I made sure that I started paying her back as soon as I got my first job. I'm pretty sure it would have taken me way longer to graduate had she and my uncle chosen not to help me out at the time for the past 5 years. I haven't been in touch with with my family, but I make an appointment to speak to my aunt and uncle almost every week. I wasn't very close to the rest of my family anyway, so I hardly have any contact with anybody else, and I'm not very active on social media either. So it's just my aunt and a couple of old friends who know where I live and what I have been up to in the past 5 years. Thankfully, life hasn't actually been bad, and I'm doing well enough for myself. I don't miss my family at all, because honestly, I've come to terms with the fact that they never loved me, and definitely not enough to question my brother's intentions. I did not want to know anything about them because I was just not interested. So I told everybody in my life that even if they did find out anything about my parents and James and what they were up to, I did not want to hear it. I wanted to move on without any of them in my life, and that's what I have done. So I have never looked back after I got kicked out, and it wasn't until recently that I found out what was going on with my family, only because of the letter that they sent to me through my aunt. Everybody in my life had the strictest instruction that they were not allowed to speak to my family about my whereabouts and give out my contact info. So that's why my aunt hadn't told them anything about my address or how to contact me when they had visited her to ask about me. And because of that, they couldn't contact me directly. So they left a letter with her, and she brought it to me. In that letter, my parents told me that they were really sorry for how they had treated me in the past, and they had started to see that James was not the perfect son that they thought they had raised. Apparently, lots of things had gone wrong after I got kicked out of the family. Like James had decided to take a gap year after high school, but then it turned into another year. All of a sudden, he had just wasted 3 years of his life doing nothing but partying with his friends every weekend and playing video games all day. He hadn't even bothered to take up any jobs and lived off his parents, even though they tried to get him to do something about this. And then 2 years back, my dad started his own business, and it took up a lot of money. So they gave my brother an ultimatum and told him that he needed to find a job, or else he would get kicked out. James then had the genius idea of asking his dad to hire him. And after some discussion, my parents agreed to do that, because then they could train him to take over in the future. For a couple of months, things went smoothly, and he even got a place of his own with the money that he had been making working with our dad. But then my dad started to notice discrepancies in the accounts, and since my brother was responsible for it, he questioned it. And my brother admitted that he had been stealing some money for a few weeks, but he had never thought that he would get caught because he didn't think it was significant enough to come under the radar. This was almost a year ago, and my parents had been very upset, but they had forgiven him and didn't even fire him. I don't know why they would do that, because that just showed him that he could get away with whatever he wanted, because they were more concerned about their family and reputation and stuff like that. So he did stuff like this again, and once again, when he was caught, he apologized profusely and started begging my parents not to fire him. And once again, it worked. So like they say, the third time's the charm. And this time, a few weeks back, when he was caught stealing from the company, again, my parents decided to fire him and file a lawsuit against him for embezzlement. They had decided to skip the mediation because they did not want to settle out of court. They wanted this to go to trial so they could get him to return all their money and also have him punished for whatever he had been putting them through. And they were writing to me, not just because they wanted to acknowledge their mistakes, but because they wanted me to help them out by testifying against my brother. It had taken them 5 years to realize that I had been telling the truth that day, and that I obviously hadn't stolen my brother's C to buy a MacBook for myself. They were finally ready to accept that maybe he had created that situation just to get me in trouble, but now it's not enough anymore. From the letter, I figured out that after I got kicked out, my brother had an extremely easy life. He had been working part-time jobs in high school. Once he had framed me and got kicked out, I guess my parents went soft on him, and that's why they allowed him to quit working altogether for almost 3 years, and he got to be lazy and do nothing while I was out here juggling work and education so that I could pay back my aunt eventually and go ahead in life. It felt extremely unfair, and an apology was not going to fix that. So that letter really didn't mean much to me. Besides, I know that they are writing to me because they need my help to testify against my brother and have him punished. But I don't think they would have ever needed to take things so far if they had disciplined my brother in the past. I don't even know if they actually mean their apology or if it's just because they want me to help them out. And even if it was genuine, I have my work in my life to think about, and I don't want to disturb that. I'm happy with everything the way it is. And I'm really not interested in going back to my family drama because the past 5 years have been lonely but peaceful, and that's exactly how I want it. I know that this is an excellent opportunity to get back at my brother for everything that he did, and it's great that my parents have finally realized that he's not a good person and are willing to punish him for it. But for me, it's too little too late, and I'm not interested in helping them out. However, the only thing that has been holding me back right now from telling my parents that I'm not willing to help them out is the fact that I know that my testimony will make the biggest difference of all, and I don't know if opting to stay out of this would be the right thing to do. Given the circumstances, I just feel very strangely guilty. So Ida, for not wanting to help my parents out to sue my brother. Update 1. Hey, so it's been a couple of days since I posted in yesterday I spoke to my aunt, and I told her that I wanted her to tell my parents that I was not going to be helping them out. I realized that I like my life the way that it is, and I don't want to get back in touch with my parents and stuff. I really hope that they are able to bring my brother to justice and things work out for them, but I don't want to be a part of it. I knew for a fact that if I decided to help them out, I would have to talk to them, and maybe they would end up back in my life, which is not something I'm looking forward to right now because I don't think I've forgiven them. Also, be it to punish him or not, I don't want anything to do with my brother. So when I told my aunt about my decision, she told me that she thought I was doing the right thing, even if it was gonna make things. Just had an issue with the timing of it all, because recently my wife and I just made some big purchases for the both of us, but they are under my name. It's not a big deal for her, and neither is it for me, because I know that we love each other. We're going to make it work, no matter how much we fight. And in fact, we are not even fighting right now. Just her opinion that she is placed, and I'm considering it. I'm not even outright rejecting it. Divorce is definitely not on the table for us, but I guess my in-laws have been doing some thinking of their own, and that is why they made the situation at this time. It's just the timing that got to me, because even now they haven't stopped suspecting me, and they think that they care about my wife and always have their daughter's best interests at heart, but I don't, which is why they always have to put me down. It's very obvious that even now they really haven't accepted me as part of the family, and that's what I have issue with. As for how much they supported us financially in the beginning, I haven't repaid that. If they ask for it, then I have no qualms about paying it all back to them. The only reason I haven't offered it myself yet is because I did not think that I owed them that. Because as soon as my business started making money, my wife did not have to spend a single dollar out of her own pockets. I've taken great care. And at this point in time, I think we can call it even whatever money they had contributed, it had been for their daughter. So it had always been given to her directly, and I had no part to play in it. And my wife hasn't had to spend much from some personal expenses since my business started making money. So I think my debt has been repaired in that way. But even after that, if my in-laws think that I should pay them back now, I would gladly do it if that gets them off my back. Update. One hey I, everyone. So it has been a week since that fight that I had with my in-laws. And from what I have read so far, people have mixed opinions on my situation, but I have made up my mind. I'm going to return all the money. I do have an arbitrary figure, and I'm doing well for myself now, so I don't want to owe them anything. Neither do I want to constantly feel like I'm indebted to them forever, and I need to worship the ground that they walk on. Because of that, I want to be able to stand up for myself without having them throw this in my face. And the only way to deal with this problem is by paying them back all the money that they claim to have supported us by contributing in our initial days. I discussed this idea with my wife, and she thinks it's good enough since her parents have not stopped trying to brainwash her into filing for a divorce from me, because they think that I have disrespected them several times, even though they have never taken into account the fact that they have also disrespected me and even my family on several occasions. They can't handle it when I am treating them the same way they have treated me and my family for years. I don't think they had the right to be dishing it out in the first place either. Besides, I think I was quite polite with them in the beginning before the argument started and they started bringing up personal stuff and going below the belt, but with them, they have always been outright against me and have never even pretended that they like me or my family. So I think the way that I behave with them is quite reasonable. After spending so many years suppressing my feelings and trying my best to be respectful of them now by paying back the money, I will owe them absolutely nothing, since they have never supported me emotionally or even pretended like they accept me. Both my wife and I are really exhausted trying to deal with the situation at hand, so we are hoping that writing them a check will solve all our problems. Usually, that's not the way I go in relationships, since I know that throwing money at something will not solve the problem. But with them, I think that's the way to go, because they are literally that materialistic and selfish. I can't imagine any other parents in the world trying to ruin their own daughter's marriage, especially when a kid is involved, because they think that their own ego is bigger and more important than everything else. It just speaks volumes about how much they actually care for her and how much they like to pretend that they have her best interest at heart. But the reality is that the only thing that they care about is their image, their ego, and themselves update to. So earlier today, my wife spoke to her parents and told them that I was ready to write them a check and end this whole situation, because it was getting exhausting to deal with, even for her. And since all of this had started because of the money, maybe writing them a check to repay them for everything that they had done for us in the past is going to fix things. But of course, that did not fix anything. They got offended at the suggestion itself that they could be bought out. They told my wife that this was not about the money, which is strange, because from the way that they were behaving the other day while we were fighting, it felt like it was all about the money. However, now, all of a sudden, it's about the respect that I have never shown them, which is insane, because I can literally claim the same thing for them. My wife and I don't even know what they are talking about, because I have always behaved very politely and civil with them. It's they who have always had an attitude with me. I have literally never disrespected them, but they think that this one incident of me refusing to acknowledge and be thankful for the fact that they had supported us a little bit in the beginning is equal to years and years of them taking advantage of my love for their daughter and constantly trying to instigate me or my family members by being as disrespectful as they possibly can. It is not the same thing at all. And at this point, even my wife agrees that they didn't support me as much as they're claiming they did. And on top of that, I've already said that I'm gonna pay them back, so I won't owe them anything. We don't see where the problem is. If this is gonna be about respect instead of money, I really don't think that I owe anything to them for reasons that I have already mentioned. Thankfully, they are not speaking to me at the moment. They are only interacting with their daughter, and my wife is completely on my side. They are still trying to brainwash her into filing for a divorce, and now they started telling her that she needs to start taking our son under her wing and stuff, and I really can't imagine resuming a normal relationship with them. After all of this, it's just pathetic that ruining our marriage won't be enough for them. They need my wife to file for custody because of their own ego. I think this is a reason enough for me not to respect them at all, because this is the kind of treatment that I have been receiving ever since I met my wife. Update 3. It has been slightly over 2 weeks since that fight that I had with my in-laws, and for the past couple of days, my wife has not been responding to them because she thinks it's a lost battle. She had tried her best to explain to her parents why they were wrong, but they kept telling her to file for a divorce, and she got tired of trying to fix the situation all by herself. They had made it clear that they were not interested in fixing things anymore, so she had stopped replying to them, and that's why they decided to show up at our house today. I was the one who opened the door to them, and they ignored me and walked straight in and started calling for my wife. At this point, I'm not even surprised that they are acting like this after accusing me of being respectful to them. They are just hypocrites, and they will always be just like this. Anyway, I didn't even say anything. I just kept waiting for my life to come out, and after a while, when she did, she immediately told her parents that she was not interested in speaking to them unless they were ready to acknowledge our side of things. They started telling her that they were only here to confront her about her behavior because she was going the same way that I did and becoming increasingly disrespectful to them as well if I was indebted to them. So was she, and she shouldn't forget that when her parents made that statement, she immediately lost her temper and started shouting at them, and rightfully so. She was their daughter. She hadn't asked them to do anything for her. They had just done stuff for her, and now they did not have the right to hold it against her since it had all been done of their free will if they had wished, though they could have easily declined, and we could have still made it work without their help. It's not like other parents don't do stuff like this for their kids, but they do it out of love, not because they want to throw this in their faces later. Like my in-laws, as for gratitude, we had tried our best to be grateful to them and show them respect in spite of their ridiculous behavior with me and my family over the past years. Even then, we hadn't said anything and had quietly put up with it because we did not want to create any drama and wanted to be respectful of them so that the peace of the family was maintained. But at this point, it was impossible not to stand up against them. Now they have to realize that they cannot constantly demand to be respected. Sometimes they have to earn it, and this is one of those times. So my wife ended up arguing with them for quite some time, but I said nothing and just stood in the corner because I did not want to interact with them at all. After some time, my wife started getting agitated, so I went to her side so I would be able to calm her down, and my in-laws started freaking out at me, blaming me for all of this. Because apparently all of this has started because of my refusal to dissolve the prenup, and I had to correct them. I told them that this had not started because of that. This had started when they decided that they were going to treat me badly just because I was not from the same circle of rich kids that they had expected their daughter to pick from while choosing a life partner. That's what they were really mad about for all these years, and that's why they had always treated me badly. But I had put up with it simply because I did not want to make a whole thing out of it. However, they couldn't get away with it all the time, and they needed to realize that, which is why I refused to dissolve the prenup, because they need to know that I am not going to be a puppet for them. And as they say, things got even more heated after that, since now I was also involved. But I did not let them get to me and kept my cool. They kept shouting at me, saying horrible things and cursing me out to make me mad, but I just refused to let them get under my skin because I knew that that's exactly what they want, and that made them even more upset. And they finally realized that they wouldn't be able to get to me. See, they told my wife that she needed to seriously choose between her family and me, and she declared that she was going to choose her family, which meant that she was going to choose her husband and her son. She told her parents to get out of her house and that they were going to be receiving the check. Soon after that, we would be done and dusted. Her parents were shocked because they obviously had not expected this reaction from her. They had probably just believed that they were going to get another chance because that's what usually happens. But honestly, my wife and I have had enough, and when they tried to argue after that, my wife told them that she was going to call the police and have them arrested if they did not leave immediately, and they finally left after that. We blocked them everywhere, and we are finally going to cut them out of our lives. It's going to be hard to explain to our son why he can't see his grandparents anymore, but it's fine. He has another set of grandparents who love him just as much, and maybe in the future we will be able to reconcile, but for now this has to be done. We had tried really hard to make things work with them, but unfortunately they only want things to work on their terms, and that's not going to be possible anymore. I am honestly glad that I took a stand for myself, and so did my wife. Some things had to be addressed, and we are very happy that we've dealt with the situation now.